Trump says he's reached a deal with China's Xi. Here's what to know.
From President Trump in his meeting in China, he says he reached a temporary truce in his trade war. That after meeting with China's Xi Jinping last evening. But before the meeting, the president also made an announcement about nuclear weapons, an announcement that could be seen as a provocation. Ed O'Keefe is at the White House covering it all for us. Ed, good morning. A lot of questions here.
There sure are, Tony. The president's on his way back here, but that meeting with Xi Jinping was the grand finale and main event of the president's week-long trip to Asia. The leaders of the two largest economies talked for over an hour and 40 minutes. The president says the U.S. can sign a trade deal with China, quote, very soon after they settled some key issues.
Trump went to China before you. This is true. But hopefully his advocacy for the Chinese century of prosperity is going to allow me to have a more comfortable trip in the glorious nation of the People's Republic of China. Okay? That makes me happy. He did this in Korea, but in his heart, he was in China.
And we're going to have a very successful meeting, I have no doubt.
In their first face-to-face meeting since 2019, President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping greeted each other warmly as they met for much-anticipated trade talks.
It's a great honor to be with a friend of mine.
After imposing retaliatory tariffs for the last 6 months, Trump now says they have a deal.
We'll talk about Prince Andrew as well.
Pretty soon.
We have a deal. Now, every year we'll renegotiate the deal, but I think the deal will go on for a long time.
Well,
yeah, U.S.-China trade deal, baby. I love this, okay? I love this. Trump is a fake demon, okay? 100%. But it's really funny because this is the most Trumpian move. This is so perfectly Trump. Something up and then put the pieces back together haphazardly. The art of the deal, the art of the steal, okay? He f***ed up, then he postured. He postured for months like he was a real demon, okay? Only to turn around and be like, I was just kidding. I'm a fake demon, okay? I'm a fake demon. Please, let's fix this. Please, let's fix this. And now his dumb followers will turn around and unironically act as though he actually solved something. Yeah, he solved something he broke. How is this good? How is this a good thing? It doesn't make any sense to me that there are so many Americans that literally watch this unfold and think, oh, he's so brilliant. He goes into a room and he starts on the walls. You say, what the f are you doing? You're on the walls and you're smearing your dookie on the walls. He then stops smearing dookie on the walls and then expects you to thank him. It's like, okay, but before you entered the room, there were no dookie on the walls. You put the dookie on the floor. Clean the dookie. It blows my mind. It blows my mind, dude. He goes, hey, listen, I could have kept smearing more on the walls, but I stopped. I fixed it. I fixed it. No, you broke it, and then you didn't fix. It's still worse than before you came in.
Nothing is official yet. Trump says the U.S. will reduce tariffs on Chinese goods by 10% as China works to reduce the flow of illegal fentanyl.
This is the best one. He's like, yeah, we did this for fentanyl. That was a fake reason anyway. And now the fake reason is what? Gonna be solved? Okay, got it.
And Trump says China will resume buying American soybeans and ease its limits on the export of rare earth minerals needed to make batteries and other key technology.
There's no roadblock at all on rare earth. That will hopefully disappear from our vocabulary for a little while.
According to Chinese state media, Xi agreed to reach a consensus on important economic and trade issues. The president says he plans to go to China in April as the two leaders continue to mend a volatile relationship.
On the scale of from 0 to 10, with 10 being the best, I would say the meeting was a 12. I think it was a 12. I think very importantly, just the whole relationship is very, very important.
Very interesting, Ed. But before you go, on the nuclear question, just before the meeting, Trump said he was directing the Pentagon to resume testing nuclear weapons. What more can you tell us on that?
Yeah, the president said in a social media post that he wants to resume those tests on a, quote, equal basis with Russia and China. That would be a major shift since the U.S. hasn't carried out such tests since the early 1990s. The president offered no details about the timing of the specific tests by other countries he was referring to. Also on this trip, the president said his administration is going to share technology that will allow South Korea to build a nuclear-powered submarine. Over here in the U.S. in Philadelphia, the South Koreans want to do so to defend the waters around the Korean peninsula. So it's a big military win for the Koreans and a potential economic boost for the United States. Tony?
All right, Ed, thank you very much.
It's the latest twist in the US-China trading relationship, but it's worth taking stock of just how we got here. This is what Donald Trump's been up to since coming into power the second time round. You can see that within months of coming into office, he was ramping up tariffs on China, first with that 10% broad-based tariff to punish them for their role in the fentanyl trade. That was then increased to 20%. And by spring, you can see things had reached boiling point, a tit-for-tat trade war. This was in the midst of Liberation Day. You might remember when Trump announced tariffs on countries across the world. China hit back. The US tariff was hitting about 145%, both countries effectively deciding to stop trading with each other. Tempers calmed. Behind the scenes, both sides have been trying to figure out a long-lasting deal. But then at the beginning of the month, well, things flared up again. China announced export controls on rare earth elements that are critical for modern-day manufacturing. Trump threatened them with an additional 100% tariff. Well, we've heard today that again, things have calmed down, talks have gone well, and Trump actually announced that he would reduce that 20% fentanyl tariff to 10%. So that's where we're at now. But as you can see, the state of things, the average tariffs are still higher than they were at the beginning of the year. And we can see how the new baseline has shifted in this next chart as well, how the new normal has shifted. In his first presidency, Trump was very much focused on targeted tariffs on things like electricals, solar panels, and steel. These are kind of the amount of goods that are under the purview of tariffs. Biden didn't really change things too much, but nor did he row back. And then second time round, where you can see Trump has ratcheted things up. Now everything is subject to a tariff. We're at 100%. When we talk about tariffs, as we know, this isn't all about tariffs. It's also about export controls. And here, rare earth elements is something, as I mentioned, China is really weaponizing. The US, for their part, can control computer chips and the export of computer chips to China, particularly NVIDIA's AI chips.
Yeah. By the way, there was one quote that I read of Xi Jinping giving up TikTok and using that as like a leverage point in the deal. And he literally said, I didn't care much for TikTok. It felt like digital opiates for me, which is funny because that's what I've said about TikTok in terms of like how it entered the American marketplace. He straight up, he was like, I don't really care much for TikTok. It always struck me as digital opiates, which is, it's true. And not only is it true, but what's interesting about it is that like they don't have it in China. That's what I've always pointed to with respect to TikTok, where I was like, they quite literally see TikTok. Here it is. If they thought TikTok was a useful tool, they would have the same exact thing in China. But Douyin is far more controlled. Okay. And I think you will see more and more people come to terms with the walled garden approach or the Chinese firewall, the great digital firewall, as a necessary thing. The worse our AI-induced hallucinating masses get due to unlimited amounts of internet. But yeah, here he said it right here. The concession was TikTok. The quiet calculation, balancing pressure with appeasement, now forms the bedrock of China's strategy. In the tense lead up to trade talks in Madrid this September, Xi knew he needed to offer a concession to get what he truly wanted. Summits with Trump to hash out issues one-on-one. The concession was TikTok. For Trump, forcing the sale of the high-profile app was a populist victory framed around national security. For Xi, however, the app was a low-cost bargaining chip. He had privately dismissed it as spiritual opium, according to the people close to Beijing, and viewed it as an easy sacrifice to secure the continued dialogue China needed. As a result, Xi set the stage for a series of summits with Trump. This happened already after the meeting next week in South Korea. Beijing hopes to arrange a Trump visit to China early next year, and finally a Xi trip to the U.S. in late 2026. I'm confused. Are you defending the firewall? What's your take on it? I unironically think that the Chinese firewall that was developed was presented as a way to keep the Chinese masses from they like the way that it was presented in the West was like, oh, this is a bad thing. And it's understandable. We have a much more social libertarian perspective when it comes to free flowing information and things of that nature here in the West. And I agree with that in principle. But for many, many years, it was talked about as though like the firewall was created to silence and oppress the Chinese masses. And it turns out it was actually to keep us out because we are poisonous. I mean, look to every other country where they wear MAGA hats when they are doing protests, right-wing protests. Look to every other country that gets their notes from our fascists. Even countries with historic fascist movements have dropped their own historic fascist movements for the American Burger Reich style fascism. Clearly, we are brain poison. Can't we find a middle ground that isn't censorship while not having an Elon Grokpedia? If it's one or the other, I think the other might be better. Listen. I'm in America. I love free speech and I will defend it. Okay. But I don't think there is a middle ground. I don't think there is a middle ground is my point. The firewall was set in place before MAGA though, wasn't it? Yes. Absolutely. It was. I think initially it was so that there wasn't a lot of intervention. But nowadays, as people's attitudes change about American brain poison manifesting all around the world, people are coming to that reality that potentially this initial attempt at making sure that American brain poison couldn't enter the Chinese digital airwaves could have possibly been a good idea. I don't know. I'm so black-pilled. I read this long article about the literacy rates plummeting in the United States of America and how like throughout history, it was a Baffler magazine article. It was really good. And it black-pilled me. It's so hard. Talking about the oratory tradition initially and then like the invention of the printing press and how like people's way of thinking changed as a consequence of how we disseminated information in the past before the printing press or before writing in general, before literacy in general was a thing. We just kind of passed information along and we thought differently about the world. And we are now going back to that. Yeah, here it is. The addictive nature of smartphones is a very serious problem contributing to the decline of literacy, but the phones exist in a social context and not the other way around. And this goes through this long and convoluted, not convoluted, but like it's a pretty solid history of literacy and how initially the elites were reluctant to allow the masses to learn how to read, and how after they were allowed to read, how the not the financial elite, but the academic elite still was like, oh, these masses are stupid. They just want to read fiction and blah blah blah, like irrelevant shit. All the way down to the invention of the radio and what that did to literacy rates, the invention of the television, what that did to literacy rates, and then the invention of the internet and what that did to literacy rates, and then the invention of short form content on the internet and what that has done to literacy rates, which is why you have like 70% of Americans that can read at like a competent 6th grade level only, whereas the literacy rates in China is at like 94%. And it even brings up the fact that America unironically tried to advance and improve literacy rates in the United States of America because they were seeing the USSR create a much more competent labor force, a much smarter labor force. And that's the reason why they actually greatly pushed it here in the United States of America to try to get the Americans to learn how to read and write at a competent level. But now in the age of AI, with short form video, it's over. This is why I always stress the importance of whoever listens to me. This is why I always tell them, don't with AI. You will literally have a tremendous upper hand against the rest of your generation if you actually still continue to try and wire your brain the old-fashioned way. You will not fall into the trap of cognitive offloading, and you will be able to create critical thinking skills that will be infinitely more valuable in the future when all of those tasks are delegated to a machine. I'm not saying be a Luddite. I'm not saying don't fuck with AI at all, but it's very important. And not only that, but the piece also brings this up, and this is something I talked about before as well. There is a class dynamic here. Wealthy children go to schools and camps where they are not allowed to have their phones, so they can have a normal development. Whereas the children of the poor, the dispossessed masses, they go to public school where there's no such consideration or care. So they literally slam their brains with unimaginable toxicity on a daily basis and probably warp their collective consciousness. Yeah. Rich people look to the future and recognize the dangers and try to make sure that their next of kin, the next generation, is not as warped by this. Okay? Is not as warped by this at all. Whereas the children of the poor will get... China is not a utopia, but its citizens have a brighter future than ours, and they will be able to read about it thanks to a socio-political system that still sees literacy as necessary and retains primacy over private capital. That's one of the takeaways from the article. I mean, it's in the article, sorry. And it's actually a brilliant take. And it sucks because I get it. I get wanting to... Dude, if you ask me if I've seen predictive history one more time, I'm going to put you on a spaceship, okay? Yes, I have. Please stop spamming this guy. Oh my God. I have. He has some interesting takes and then some kooky ass ones. Okay, calm down. Jesus Christ. Y'all just find one crank on the internet with like a decent take on one issue and then just like keep spamming it over and over again. Please stop. We're talking about something different and perhaps more consequential. Okay? TikTok about AI and education echoing exactly what you're saying. The kids now who are using AI without guardrails are frying their ability to learn. Yes. I'm not saying anything about Professor Jiang. He seems chill, okay? I just, not, time and place. Okay? He also does have some crank-ass takes, to be fair. Right-wingers have been making fake AI videos of supposed black women demanding taxpayers keep paying their food stamps. I know. And the chuds are eating it up. I know. I saw this. The future is so dire, folks. We're going to be talking about this in a little bit when we get to the SNAP benefits getting cut. Just shut the up about AI. No, I will not. TV will make us dumb. It's a scourge to society. Formal development. School is jail. Emancipate our children. Dude, I'm Mr. Broad Tent, okay? I'm Mr. Popular Front. But goddamn, some of you crusty-ass anarchists, like, for no reason whatsoever, give credence to what the USSR did with these kinds of behaviors, okay? It's crazy. Anarchist who's also pro-AI is awesome. I need you to understand. Technological developments is great. I'm a fan, okay? This even includes AI. But, and this is a very important but, there are important cognitive developments that need to take place, okay? You just need to do that. You need to do that, okay? You need to work your brain. It's a muscle. People forget it. Children's labor was crucial to the survival of the whole household, so much so that socialist newspaper Égalité denounced compulsory schooling, declaring that the practice would wrest from the working family a resource it cannot spare, child labor, okay? Anyway, it's a really great piece. I read it. It was very black-pilling.
Ahead of President Trump's arrival here in Asia, you'd be forgiven for thinking that America and China were on a diplomatic collision course. But for all this year's tit-for-tat on tariffs and trade, the truth is that the world's economies are so intertwined that even President Xi of China travels on an American-built jumbo jet. Behind the scenes, diplomats from both sides laid the framework for a deal at the weekend, though the body language between these leaders was largely stiff and formal.
But he's a very tough negotiator. That's not good.
At this, their first face-to-face meeting in 6 years, probably for domestic consumption back home. China's rise to superpower giving it parity, and Mr. Trump no doubt relishing his latest big power powwow on the global stage. But President Xi was never going to agree to stop buying oil from his main diplomatic ally, Russia. Mr. Trump said it wasn't really discussed.
President Xi is a great leader of a great country, and I think we're going to have a fantastic relationship
She with the brutal hairline mog? Okay, dude.
for a long period of time, and it's an honor to have you with us.
While China's
You predicted the outcome of the Trump-China trade deal? Page not available. Do you think China will back down without gaining serious concessions out of this? From America? I don't think they'll get a lot of concessions from America. I think China will actually concede in an effort to maintain global trade stability. That's what my suspicion is. They'll offer something to Donald Trump to make it seem like he's a big boy who actually did this, who dominated little old China. That's my suspicion. And the only reason why they will do that is because they benefit from global trade working the way. Wrong, Law? Wait, no, they did. That's exactly what happened. What are you talking about? Wrong. That's exactly what happened. Aesthetically, they literally gave Donald Trump a couple gimmies that they don't give a shit about, whether it be TikTok or repurchasing, like signing back on to purchase soybeans and whatnot. And that's it. Wrong. Going back to 8 months ago isn't conceding. No, that's guys, you're failing to comprehend what I'm saying. It currently does. She won't bend the knee to the paper tiger. No, it's not a real bending of the knee, dummy. I never said that. I'm saying China will make slight concessions, like so that Trump can just, stroke his ego and present a W, like, oh, we dominated China. But before that happens, and it hasn't happened yet, obviously, this period of unprecedented global trade instability and market volatility is happening because China, I think, wants to use the temper tantrum being thrown by the idiot in charge as a way to remind their global trade partners who the adults in the room actually are. If you think China will make slight concessions, doesn't that mean that you think Trump holds more cards over them? No. Donald Trump is saying, I have a nuke. I am going to nuke myself and the entire global marketplace. Of course, China doesn't want the entire global trade design to be nuked overnight. They stand to benefit from the way trade is conducted on the international stage. America basically is looking at the situation in front of them. They've recognized that China is lapping us. They recognize that China is far more developed. They have a lot of power. And if you look at it like a board game, America basically recognizes that China is winning the board game. So they're saying, I'm going to literally flip the table. As a negotiation tactic, they're saying, I'm going to flip the table if you don't meet my insane demands. But there are other players on the board game as well. And they're noticing that America is saying they want to flip the table, which will create unprecedented chaos. Nobody gotta respect chat misunderstanding you the same way now as they did when this was recorded, Lamau. I mean, this is my life, dude. Every damn day, I'm pushing the boulder over the goddamn hill, only for the boulder to fall back to the bottom every day. But he wants that. So now China is looking at the other players on the table and saying, you see, this guy's a asshole. He wants to blow up this goddamn game. I still want to play the game. Maybe I'll win the game in the end, but I still want to play the game. Do you want to continue playing the game, or do you want this person to flip the table and no one wins? You are admitting that Trump holds the cards. If China wanted to flip the table, they could too. If Trump held all the cards as the global hegemon, then China would have conceded overnight. Why has that not happened yet? Like, actually, fully conceded. Nobody wants nukes to be launched, okay? Obviously. So you have to play, you have to play this delicate tightrope when the guy controlling the global reserve currency is trying to nuke it into oblivion for no reason, for no discernible reason. This is why you pay me the big bucks. You were wrong there, Lamau. Wait, what? Everything that I said was correct. I even was careful to say maybe the European trade partners. Oh, you're talking about the nuke, like actual nukes that Trump announced he's testing. Yeah, come on. Don't be silly. This was a common Chinese take the moment Trump won the election. This Greek Arab copied it and pretends it came from foresight. It's so funny because Topsy hates that I am Chinese in my heart and in my soul and can conduct this analysis that many Western analysts are completely incapable of conducting, and he hates it. He hates that just as the fox assumes the tiger's ferocity, so do you assume the words of wise men. I can see through your act. You see that? You see that? Top G, back at it again, totally coping with the fact that I am Chinese. I am in my heart and in my soul Chinese. And that is precisely the reason why I can conduct this kind of analysis that turns out to be true. You said China was going to give in. I'm not sure how that's correct in this case. What do you mean? There's still concessions there, 10% tariffs, things of that nature, but they're modest in comparison to what Donald Trump was seemingly demanding. And there have been no decoupling from China. It's exactly as I said it was going to work. I told you China is going to give modest concessions and TikTok and things like that they don't really give a shit about in the grand scheme of things to make Donald Trump feel like he got a major victory here when he actually didn't. And that is precisely what took place. Do you think 423, baby? Perhaps unsurprisingly, I haven't seen many media outlets report accurately on the deal reached between Trump and Xi today, most forgetting to mention crucial aspects of it, and almost all failing to contextualize the 47% tariff figure quoted by Trump. Let me try to detail as accurately as I can, drawing from sources from both sides. On the Chinese side, I mostly use China Ministry of Commerce statement issued today at 3 p.m. Beijing time, so roughly 1 hour and a half after the deal was concluded. And on the U.S. side, I use statements by Trump himself and others present in the meeting. The key terms: the U.S. will remove the so-called 50% rule that it implemented in September for 1 year in exchange of which China will suspend the rare earths exports controls for 1 year. The removal of the 50% rule is absolutely key, yet almost no media reported on it, only mentioning that China had agreed to suspend its rare earth exports controls for 1 year. Worth mentioning, this is another thing that I said. I don't think that China was actually going to use the nuclear option of refusing to offer America rare earth minerals. If you recall, I told you that they were simply posturing to show the amount of leverage that they do actually have, but they wouldn't actually hit the maximalist position here because that would end up threatening the long-standing trade relations that they have with all of their other partners, as they are currently the monopoly. Okay, they are the monopoly. They have a monopoly on the manufacturing and the refinement and the procurement, pretty much, of these rare earth metals. As a reminder, the 50% rule was the main reason why China retaliated with the rare earths export controls. It was a huge escalation by the U.S. as it effectively increased the number of Chinese companies on the entity list by 14 times, from 1,400 companies to 20,000, meaning 14 times more Chinese companies cut off from the Western financial system, forbidden to use USD, etc. It was also the key trigger for the Nexperia debacle that's currently occurring in Europe. Remember, America's main power is that it's the global reserve currency. China's main power is that it's the global manufacturing hub. Oh my God, chat, why are we acting like Hasan is Doctor Strange? He just gave his opinion. Goddamn, just grow up. Yeah. Your take was China will pretend to be awed by Trump to make him feel good. China instead made the world realize who won. No, I'm saying that for people who are more competent, and I'm sure there's like those who actually dominate American capital as well, who are paying close attention to the back and forth between China and Donald Trump, this doesn't look good for Donald Trump at all, especially because of how long it went, okay? How long it went and the instability that was born out of the lengthy back and forth process that started because Donald Trump wanted to f the bag up, okay? Having said that, it was always going to end with China coming back to the table and being like, okay, sure, let's get back to business as fucking usual. It does not matter. MAGA is going to eat it. It doesn't matter. MAGA is stupid as f. Who cares? It was also the key trigger for the Nexperia debacle that currently is occurring in Europe. The 50% rule would have put Nexperia on the entity list, and the U.S. told the Dutch that the only way Nexperia could escape U.S. sanctions was to get rid of the Chinese ownership in the company. Hence, the Dutch's move to seize the company away from its Chinese ownership almost simultaneously with the introduction of the 50% rule. Unclear what will happen in this case now that the 50% rule has been dropped, but logic would dictate that the company would be given back to its rightful owners. Although, admittedly, expecting European legislators to act based upon logic is a tall order. Number two, the U.S. will drop its overall tariffs on China to 47%, meaning that China now benefits 16% tariffs as a part of the Liberation Day tariff policy. Of course, Trump would mention the overall number to make it sound like he didn't cave on his Liberation Day tariffs, but when one looks into the details, China actually negotiated him down to approximately 16% on his Liberation Day tariffs, down from the initial 34% and way down from the 125% peak. And they got the so-called fentanyl tariff cut by half on top of that. How so? Like, the fentanyl stuff is the stupidest one, right? Like, that was a reason for why Donald Trump said he was going to do this tariffs regime. so that he could justify it, at least within the existing confines of the American legal limitations, right? He wanted to say there's a war on fentanyl, there's a war on drug trafficking, is a war on drugs, and China is participating in this. All of these other countries are participating in this, and that's the reason why we have to slap them with these tariffs, right? So for them, for China, they just go, okay, yeah, we'll work on it. It's no different than a IOU. An IOU that like Korea offers the American government, saying like, oh, yes, Mr. President, we will totally give you $17 quintillion to develop super factories on U.S. soil. Totally. In any case, how so? First of all, before Trump 2.0 even got inaugurated, tariffs on Chinese goods were already standing at a weighted average of 20.7%. Soon after taking office in February and March, so before Liberation Day, Trump added 20% on top of that in the form of his so-called fentanyl tariff. So before Liberation Day, the overall tariffs on China was already at 40.7%. Oh, by the way, this is, yes, I do call stress testing xenophobia, which I think will be a more common thing that people say, because they're trying to see how much the European vassal states, how much the European vassal states will remain committed to America, even if America keeps bullying them and dominating them and ritualistically humiliating them, because they're just terrified of the unknown Chinese form of international dominance. Okay? Eventually, I suspect, and there is some initiatives in this regard, the closer you are in proximity to China, the more interested you are in doing a BRICS-style leveraged relationship. And the further out you are, the more European you are, the closer you are to Europe as a vassal state of empire, as a vassal state of the American empire, the less interested you are in doing a BRICS-style leveraged relationship with China in order to get an upper hand in your negotiations with America. Okay? This doesn't mean you fully find yourself in the throes of Chinese control or become a vassal state to China. I'm just simply saying, you know, behaving in a way that is consistent with like India, for example, right? Self-interested, carving out some semblance of sovereignty in your negotiations by saying, okay, well, we have another major partner here that we are actually working with. But yes, so U.S. forced Netherlands to seize Nexperia over Chinese ownership, then immediately suspended the rule in the China deal. Dutch got played. They did the dirty work, and now they hold the bag. While the U.S. normalized relations. How many more times will this happen until European partners go, okay, well, one side presents stability, the other side, and prosperity, the other side presents danger and instability. In any case, let's get back to this. Then on Liberation Day, Trump added a 34% reciprocal tariff on top of that. So 74.7% overall tariffs, which he again escalated to 125% by April 10th after China retaliated. This brought the peak to 145% just from Liberation Day, blah, blah, blah. Overall rate is now going down to 47. Given the fact that the deal includes a 50% reduction on fentanyl tariff from 20% down to 10, means that China has now negotiated the Liberation Day down from 125% to about 16%. Since 20.7 plus 10% fentanyl plus 60% Liberation Day is approximately equal to 47% overall. This means that when it comes to Liberation Day tariffs, China will stand roughly on par with the EU, who are at 15%, or South Korea, who will also likely be around 15%. The U.S. will suspend its hostile actions on China's ships and shipbuilding industry, in exchange of which China will also suspend its retaliatory measures. Other parts of the deal, TikTok, China mentioned they agreed to properly resolve the TikTok issue, which is probably diplomatic speech to say that it's not resolved yet. Soybeans, China mentioned that both sides reached consensus on expanding agricultural product trade, while Trump mentioned that China will buy tremendous amounts of soybeans, which all in all probably means that China agreed to resume buying U.S. soybeans, which they had stopped as a retaliatory measure as leverage in the trade war. Fentanyl, both sides agree on anti-drug cooperation regarding fentanyl, which is language that is pretty boilerplate in U.S.-China discussions, so probably nothing new here. Handling of individual enterprise cases, which is pretty opaque language that suggests both sides discuss how to handle specific companies' issues, NVIDIA, Huawei, Nexperia, and that they reach consensus on this. Future summitry, Trump commits to visiting China in April 2026 with mutual support pledged for China's 2026 APEC holding and America's G20 summit. This signals both sides expect the relationships to stabilize enough for Xi and Trump to meet several times in person in 2026. U.S. or China in charge will not affect my life. The world financial system runs on IOUs. US or China in charge. I mean, you're not totally wrong. I get what you're saying. All in all, I would say that the key feature of this deal is the reciprocity and almost religious balance in every aspect. Each concession matched by the other, each suspension mirrored. It shows we're now dealing with peer competitors who can effectively keep each other in check. Okay? You can see how immensely things have changed if you contrast this deal with Trump's so-called Phase 1 agreement from his first term, with its unilateral Chinese commitments to buy American products and enact structural reforms to rebalance trade, with the U.S. warning it would vigilantly monitor Chinese compliance. All from an era when the U.S. could still dictate terms. None of that unequal framework survives here. Hold on. Let me just order this thing. None of the unequal framework survives here. Instead of Washington trying to reform China based on its interests, all it can do is learn to coexist with it. If it's still early days, though. For instance, the deal doesn't mention fundamental issues such as Taiwan. This is clearly not a grand strategic reset, but rather both powers trying to figure out the rules of engagement of our new multipolar reality. The funniest part about this was, and I can't stress this enough, none of this needed to happen. Okay? Like, none of this needed that. If Donald Trump was just like, yeah, of course, China's a massive trade partner, we're just going to continue doing business as usual with them. None of this had to have happened at all. No tariffs, no nothing. And I don't think Trump was able to successfully decouple the rest of the world from China, nor did it successfully decouple America from China, because you can't do that if your single responsibility to the public is that they still get a steady flow of treats at a reasonable cost. Because if the treats go away due to the fact that you're no longer utilizing the cheap goods manufacturer of the world, what is there that remains for the average American? What is there that the average American could look forward to? Hello, chatter. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Crayons? Xi Jinping mentioned in his introductory statement in the meeting that the U.S.-China relationship was a giant ship going through winds, waves, and challenges that needed to be steadily sailed forward by both leaders. That's pretty much what this meeting was. The winds and waves are still there, but at least both sides seem to acknowledge that they're now on the same ship. Man, you got to stop responding back to those trolls. I think it's a fun way to respond to them when they come in with hatred. If I just respond with, not that, you know?
Leader sounded much more cautious, talking about what he later called basic consensus.
Given our different national conditions, we do not always see eye to eye with each other. And it is normal for the two leading economies of the world to have frictions now and then.
Donald Trump announced afterwards that he would cut overall tariffs on China to 47%, and that China had agreed to a year's postponement on controlling its rare earth exports. The aggressive rhetoric of the recent past set aside, with the US president now due to visit China next April.
I thought it was an amazing meeting. He's a great leader of a very powerful, very strong country, China. And what can I say? It was an outstanding group of decisions, I think, that was made. A lot of decisions were made, too. There wasn't too much left out there.
Both sides have now backed away from a global trade war, with pragmatism winning the day. Though we still don't know whether Chinese-owned TikTok will be allowed to operate in America, or whether China will...
Yeah, Bros Humbled is right, dude. Very different energy. Is a clear, China got hands moment.
One day invade.
Actually, I don't even know if that's the case, because he's too self-involved and too stupid to recognize it. I'm going to be honest.
Taiwan, though tensions have certainly been reduced for now. I'm now joined by Han Lin, who is the China director for the Asia Group consultancy, and he's now in Shanghai. Han, thank you for joining us. I wanted to ask you first whether this meeting, this summit, whether it is the breakthrough that President Trump says it is. I mean, he's talking about it in terms of it being a 12 out of 10 success of a meeting.
Please.
Well, we love that optimism, and certainly looking at the announcements, Trump has mentioned it's a great meeting. Now, interestingly, on the China side, their response has been more tempered, more general, but they haven't made any major contradictions either. So in many ways, this meeting represents more of a tactical pause than a strategic breakthrough. But given the history and trend of U.S.-China relations, maybe that's the best we can expect.
Do you think this caution from President Xi is for domestic consumption, that he wants to appear tough with the Americans? Or are the Chinese basically unsure of President Trump? They don't really believe that there is peace in our time with such a unpredictable president?
So the way China looks at it is that they're familiar with the Trump playbook, given that their experience during the first Trump administration. So in the second round, during this current time period, they feel like they have a deeper toolkit to respond and retaliate if necessary.
Bro, it's like, dude, how can you trust? Who can trust not just America, but especially Donald Trump? Like, how? Yeah, I mean, if you in this day and age, if you trust Donald Trump, you're a bit of a fool. Ally and enemy alike. It's kind of dumb to do that, no?
And they've learned the lesson, which is if Trump hits, they should hit back easily and with strength, and ideally keep it proportional. But certainly one thing that they have kept in mind is that, at least for this purpose of this meeting, they want to try to maintain some level of de-escalation, because if they can keep U.S.-China relations fairly calm, it allows them to concentrate more on a lot of domestic development and reforms, specifically in their upcoming 15th five-year plan.
And with Mr. Trump due to visit China next April, which has now been announced, that sort of binds him in, doesn't it? I mean, it means that they both have to lower the aggressive rhetoric for that meeting to take place, which suggests you might have a period of stability. But there again, President Trump might change his mind.
Absolutely. We really can't predict any occasional flare-ups that do.
Did you see Trump in Japan saying China's better? Wait, what? No, that's crazy.
Happen. But it is an important point that on the calendar, they're looking to target
dog killer. Dog killer is wild. I thought it was dog abuser. Now it's tuned up. Now it's tuned up to dog killer. Cool.
A Trump-Xi meeting in the early part of next year.
Chatter thinks I'm the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kirsty Noem.
And also at the latter part of the year when President Xi comes to the U.S. for the G20. So the fact that you've got some timeline and milestones put in place of when other summits should happen, it allows and acts as a disciplining process, ideally to keep some of the more hawkish elements on both sides relatively at bay, because nobody wants to really spoil the summits.
And who has more leverage here? Is it the Chinese side because they control the exports of these crucial rare earths, which are used in so much technology these days? Or is it the American side, which of course takes a lot of Chinese exports?
The U.S. has considerable leverage in their control of foundational technologies, the large consumer market, the control of the U.S. dollar, and so forth. But China has its own sources of resilience, its own large market, its manufacturing control base, and so forth. But at least in the short term, although the U.S. looks like they have a bit of an upper hand and able to dictate the pace and intensity of discussions, China is playing a different game. They're focused on a longer time horizon, and there's a suggestion that, at least within this agreement, they were able to achieve reasonable objectives with very little concessions.
It does make you wonder what all that tension, which has dominated most of this year, what it was all for, really, if we've not gone back to the status quo ante, but we've returned to a much sort of calmer situation than there was before.
Despite a lot of the tensions, it seems like pragmatism now reigns. And this is important given the calendar of both presidents. So for President Trump, he needs to be focused on next year's midterms. And so it's in his interest that there is a more stable U.S.-China relationship. And for China,
literally the exact same wording you used. Yes, because I am Chinese, brother. I need you to understand. Look, I'm not like a brilliant guy by any metric, okay? I'm just applying common sense. But the only thing that makes my analysis different than many other Western analysts is the fact that I basically look at the Chinese system and then don't immediately assume that it's bad and wrong and nefarious and destined to fail. That's it. I don't have the pro-capitalist horse blinders on. Whereas, unfortunately, for many of our academics that went through college education, got their master's, got their graduate degrees, they can't comprehend this. They literally cannot see the world outside of Western liberal capitalist democracy. They just can't. They can't do it. It's not just xenophobia, chatters. You have to understand. It is the fact that they just genuinely look at what China is doing and they don't think about it as like a government that is trying to achieve the goals that they set out to achieve. And instead, a sequence of failures that somehow, I guess, never get addressed when they actually prove to be real. That is a major issue in the analysis. That is the reason why it takes 10 years for foreign policy magazine writers to finally come to the terms of like, maybe China's not doing a debt trap. And maybe there's lessons to learn here for the IMF and the World Bank, because we are not able to outcompete the Chinese loans that don't have the same rigorous austerity measure conditions that we implement in the in our trade partners in the global South. Like, that's it. That's the reason that and also the fact that no one ever gets punished for getting things wrong in the direction of the American State Department. That's it. It makes your approach and your analysis wrong consistently. Do you understand? If you never actually offer any accountability or any punishments whatsoever to people that are consistently getting wrong, then you're just going to have a bunch of article writers who are wrong all the time. But as long as they're wrong in the direction that America wants you to be, and you don't ever have to think about how you deluded people because you yourself were deluded, then it doesn't matter. You can just continue to fail upwards. That's the name of the game. Meanwhile, if you are thinking outside the box, and if you actually contest some of these narratives that are coming out of the State Department, and you get something even, a fraction off base, you will be endlessly smeared. Okay, endlessly. This has happened to Noam Chomsky. This has happened to myself. This has happened to anyone and everyone that is in any way, shape, or form contesting the pro-American narratives, whether it be around global trade or whether it be around American imperialism or whether it be around our foreign adversaries, like, or whatever the fuck they're engaging in.
Standpoints, President Xi has a lot of unfinished business in looking to strengthen China's economy and to insulate it from more future U.S. pressure and to really strengthen technology self-resiliency. So there's a lot on his plate. So both sides are at the right time with the right incentives to try to keep things fairly controlled.
And to keep things fairly controlled, no real discussion as far as we know about China's intentions towards Taiwan, whether it might.
It is pretty crazy, though, to look at like the Chinese 5-year plans over and over again. Every single half a decade, China sets up 5-year plans and then they accomplish them or accomplish a decent chunk of the 5-year plans. And then you still look at that and you go, nah, this time is different. This time they're going to fail. Like, what makes you think? They just give the game away ahead of time. They're like, this is what we're focused on. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to implement. And then they do it. And in the aftermath of the 5 years or, 15 years, 20 years, you just go, oh, they just kind of lucked into it, actually. Like, what do you mean? They said they were going to do it, and they did it. At a certain point, if you are consistently wrong, if the guy who's supposed to be educating you is consistently wrong, you have to literally turn around and be like, all right, big dog, why hasn't China collapsed yet? You said that every week for the past 20 years. Why hasn't it collapsed?